Good afternoon, everybody. It's your boy, Pigskin Pete. Happy Wednesday to everybody. I'm coming back at you today with another college football playoff ranking projection. So last week I did a video where I was projecting where the playoff committee would have these top 10 teams come the first rankings. Now, I also said in that video that some of these teams have to play each other, and if any of these teams in the top 10 lose, there will be some changes. Well, last week we saw a lot of, several losses. Now, LSU and Auburn played each other, so that took care of itself. All right. Now, the other two losses, though, were kind of shocking. At least one of them is really shocking, right? Oklahoma loses to Kansas State, and Notre Dame gets blown off the field by Michigan. So that's three top 10 teams, and of course, three top 10 teams and one top 5 team or so, according to my projections, that all lost last week. So there's a lot of movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a revised ranking projection from the playoff committee, as if the playoff committee were doing their first rankings tomorrow. This is what I think that they would do in those rankings. Now, a couple of things here. So last week's video that I did, I got a couple of suggestions from subscribers, viewers, people that commented in the comment section. And this is a good time to remind everybody out there, I am always up for suggestions on things to do to make these videos better. Now, if you're just going to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about and to do something different as far as just my overall philosophy of the channel, I'm not going to listen to that. But little things like somebody said, you know what, it would help if you put these rankings up on the screen for us to see. Great idea. So I'm going to do that today. Another guy said it would be great if you could put your personal opinion of the rankings versus what you think the playoff committee is going to do rankings. That's another great idea. I may do that next week before the final rankings come out. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put up on the screen right now what I had last week's projections are, so you can compare them to what these week's projections are. So there you have it on the left side of the screen. Sorry for the ugly yellow color. I'm sure all the LSU fans out there like that color. But it stands out, and you can see it up against this background that I have going. So that's the reason I had to do it that way. So as you can see, my projections last week, as if the playoff committee's rankings were going to come out last week, we're going to be Oregon 10, Auburn 9, Notre Dame 8, Florida 7, Penn State 6, Oklahoma 5, Clemson 4, Bama 3, Ohio State 2, and LSU 1. Now, even though I said 5 times in that video that these were not my rankings, this is my projection of what the committee's going to do, I still have people telling me they were stupid. So, look, if you have a different opinion of what you think the playoff committee's going to do, put them in the comment section. Put your projections of what the committee is going to do in the comment section, 10 through 1. And we'll do this week, and we'll do this again next week. Next week, we'll do it before Tuesday. Okay, so next Tuesday is when the first rankings come out. So we have another week of games, obviously, this weekend before they come out. Hey, listen, put yours in the comment section, and I'll put my final ones up probably on Monday or so before Tuesday, so I guess Monday, and we'll compare who's closer. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is my opinion of what they're going to do. If your opinion's different, good. I'm sure everybody's opinion's different. Maybe you can make a YouTube channel and put your own projections out there for everybody to look at. Maybe that would work. Excuse me. All this ranting's got me thirsty. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, first of all, you're going to notice is there's a lot of movement. You'll see teams that were outside of the top 10 of my projections last week coming into the top 10 this week. What you'll also notice is some of them, they're going to fall out, especially for anywhere between 6 and 10. There's a lot of movement in there, not so much in the top 4 or 5. But what I'm going to do in the interest of time and sanity for me for preparing to do this, it's not as easy as just writing it down and putting it up on the screen. Believe me, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. What I'm going to do is do these in clusters. So I'll do 10, 9, and 8. I'll explain those. 7, 6, and 5. Explain those, so on and so forth. Okay? All right, so let's start with Week 10 college football playoff committee ranking projections. Let's say that 10 times fast. All right, so here we go. Numbers 10, 9, and 8 right here. What you'll notice is a lot. First thing you'll notice here is that Georgia on a bye week went from number 11 in my projections all the way to number 8. So without even playing a game, they moved up 3 spots. That's a hell of a feat there for Georgia. The reason is, well, there's several reasons. So both Notre Dame and Auburn lost, right? And those were numbers 8 and 9 last week. For Auburn, that was their second loss. For Notre Dame, that was their second loss. So out of the top 10, probably not even, well, I don't know. Auburn may still be in the top 15. Notre Dame probably out of the top 15 even. So that moves Georgia up just, out of sheer numbers, okay? Utah at 9. Utah is making an appearance here. Utah is a, 7-1 football team. Their only loss is to Southern Cal in the Pac-12 South, which a few weeks ago people would have said Southern Cal is a terrible team. Southern Cal is tied for first place. Actually, no, they hold first place in the Pac-12 South right now because they hold the tiebreaker with Utah. The only loss that Utah has is to Southern Cal. So if both those teams went out, you could possibly see, imagine this scenario. Utah wins out, they're 11-1. Southern Cal wins out, they're 9-3. Southern Cal wins the Pac-12 South over an 11-1 Utah because they will have the tiebreaker against Utah. That would be a crazy scenario. That would also be a nightmare for the Pac-12 as a conference when you talk about playoff situations. An 11-1 Utah has a chance to go on to the Pac-12 championship if they win the South and become a 12-1 Pac-12 champion who could possibly make their way in the top 4 depending on what happens. If they don't win the South, that's over with. The only chance left is for Oregon to win out and become the 12-1 or 13-0. No, or 12-1. They lost to Auburn. 12-1 Pac-12 champ. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Utah makes their way into the top 10. Oklahoma at 10, you see there. Oklahoma falls all the way to 10 because of their loss. And look, I'm not blaming, or I don't think you should punish any team for losing one game. We see a lot of these one-loss teams here in the top 10, right? Oklahoma, Utah, Georgia, all one loss. Who has the worst loss out of all of them? Who's lost to the worst team out of all of them? Who got dominated the most out of all of them in that loss? The answer here is Oklahoma. Look, Oklahoma's chances to make it in the top 4 are not out of the question by the end of the season. A lot has to happen, though. And mainly because, not only because they lost to Kansas State, but the fact that their out-of-conference schedule is not very good. So what they have to rely on is beating Baylor probably twice and winning out. Now, those will be considered 2 good wins because Baylor's a good team. But that's what they have to rely on, which means they have to rely on Baylor to keep winning too. And just, Baylor's only losses be to Oklahoma. You'll also have to see several other things happen ahead of them. You probably have to have Penn State get knocked out at that conversation. Florida, maybe a blowout loss or 2 in the top 4. And so, yeah, the chances are dwindling for Oklahoma to get in there. But for right now, I'd have them right there at number 10 for the committee rankings. All right, let's move on to 7, 6, and 5. All right, so as you'll see here, Oregon moves up as a result of a lot of these other teams losing the same way that Georgia did. So last week I had my projection for Oregon at 10. This week I have them at 7. And that's just, again, because of the Auburn and Notre Dame losses. And I'm keeping them ahead of Georgia because I just feel like the committee's going to keep them ahead of Georgia. Oregon lost at the last second on a neutral field against Auburn. Georgia lost at home to South Carolina. Look, you could flip-flop these two, and the committee might do this too. This is just my projection of what they're going to do. I wouldn't be surprised if the committee had that flip-flopped and had Georgia at 7 and Oregon at 8. Now, the thing that's going to happen, though, this weekend is this is going to take care of itself. Georgia's either going to move out of the top 10 or move way up, possibly into the top 5 or 4 with a win over Florida this weekend. If they lose to Florida, they're out. They beat them. They're going to move way up. So this is going to take care of itself. this is not going to be the same as what the committee does come the real first ranking. But if it were tomorrow, the rankings were coming out, this is where I think they'd have them. Okay. Florida, I think again, moves up one spot just because of the other teams lost. I had them at 7 last week. I had them at 6 this week. Penn State, same thing. Okay, so you're seeing a pattern here. Penn State last week, I had them at 6 as an undefeated team in the Big Ten. They'll move up to 5 this week in my projections just simply because of the teams that lost last week. They didn't do anything wrong, not Penn State's fault. They didn't do anything great, not Penn State's fault. Okay, just moving up because of that. Now, this is another thing that will take care of itself. Whenever Penn State plays Ohio State, that'll take care of itself. Now, there's a lot of scenarios that can play out for Penn State. Penn State is not out of the top 4 of the playoff conversation by any stretch of the imagination. They have a much easier chance to get in, I think, as a one-loss team than maybe an Oklahoma does. But they'd have to certainly if they beat Ohio State, they're in the top 4. That's without a doubt. If they lose to Ohio State by a field goal, I think that game's in Columbus, so that makes a difference too. If they lose on the road at Ohio State by a field goal or 5 or 6 points or whatever, close game, and then they somehow finish 11-1, but not have the chance to be Big Ten champs. And depending on what happens with some of these other teams, they could still possibly get in there. They could backdoor their way in there. We've seen this happen before. As a matter of fact, a team in the Big Ten did this very same thing. Ohio State, as non-Big Ten champs in 16, were 11-1 because their only loss was to Penn State, and they came in and came into the into the playoffs, lost to Clemson. So it's possible. A lot has to happen. But anyways, Penn State's definitely going to move either up or down no matter what sometime in the near future. But if these rankings came out tomorrow with the playoff committee, I think they'd have them at 5. Now, if you want to, I'm just going to do 4, 3, 2, and 1 all at the same time here for a reason. Because there's no movement. That's the reason. Clemson last week blows Boston College off the field 59-7 or something. I don't even remember what the score was. It was a slaughter. But Alabama takes care of business. Ohio State takes care of business, beats Wisconsin. And people would say, well, then you should probably move Ohio State up. The committee should move Ohio State up to number 1. Right? Well, LSU also had a top 10 win last week in convincing fashion. Now, I know it was a little bit closer, but I think Auburn's a better team than Wisconsin, just in my opinion. And I think that the committee is going to agree with that. So I don't think you're going to see any movement from 4, 3, 2, or 1 in the committee's mind. Now, again, none of these, if I were to make my own personal pigskin Peete ranking, opinion, whatever, there'd be a lot of differences here. And not only the top 4, but in the entire top 10. But I'm not going to get into that today. I know everyone wants to hear what my opinion is and where I think they should be, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save that for next week before the rankings come out. Next week, before the official rankings come out, I'm going to do my final projection of where I think these teams will be ranked by the committee. And I'll do my personal opinion, because I've had a lot of people ask for that, of where I think they should be. So just wait till next week. You'll get to hear my opinion, and I'm sure my opinion is going to piss a lot of you people off. And you're going to be telling me I'm crazy. But that's fine. That's fine. Maybe that's the whole point in the first place. All right, so there you guys have it. Last week compared to this week, a lot of movement, and there will be a lot of movement, or at least some movement this coming week, especially because Georgia is playing Florida. A lot of these teams on a bye this week, though. So I know Alabama and LSU are both on a bye this week, and then they play each other next week, which will be another big-time game for these rankings. Clemson plays Wofford, which is basically like a bye. So I don't think you'll see any movement probably in this top 4. Now, depending on what happens with Georgia and Florida, that maybe they can move into that top 4 and bump one of these teams out, right? I don't know. It's kind of hard to bump somebody out if they're not playing that week, but it certainly can happen. We'll just save that for next week. All right, so guys, let me know what you think in the comment section here. Make sure you hit that like button. Of course, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, yada, 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 yada. You know the deal. I'll see you guys very soon. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete is checking out.